Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the 2022 APAICS Tech Summit. For our next segment, we are honored to be joined by Ambassador Katherine Tai for a Fireside Chat. We will discuss her journey in public service, as well as the Biden administration's priorities related to trade and technology, and how they might impact the AA and NHPI community. For a bit about the ambassador, she was sworn in as the 19th United States Trade Representative on March 18th of 2021. As a member of the President's Cabinet, Ambassador Tai is the principal trade advisor, negotiator, and spokesperson on U.S. trade policy. Prior to her unanimous Senate confirmation, Ambassador Tai spent most of her career in public service, focusing on international economic diplomacy, monitoring, and enforcement. She previously served as Chief Trade Counsel and Trade Subcommittee Staff Director for the House Ways and Means Committee in the United States Congress. In this capacity, Ambassador Tai played a pivotal role in shaping U.S. trade law, negotiation strategies, and bilateral and multilateral agreements, including the recently renegotiated United States-Mexico-Canada agreement. Ambassador Tai is also an experienced World Trade Organization litigator. She previously developed and tried cases for the Office of the United States Trade Representative, eventually becoming the Chief Counsel for China Trade Enforcement. And before transitioning to federal service, she practiced law in the private sector, clerked for district judges, and taught English in China. Ambassador Tai earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in history from Yale University and a Juris Doctorate from Harvard Law School. She is also fluent in Mandarin. Please give a warm APAICS welcome to Ambassador Katherine Tai. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ambassador.
Well, it's great to be with you, Madeline.
So APAICS was created by Secretary Norman Y. Mineta. And can you talk about what parts of his legacy resonate with you the most and how you are applying the lessons of his career in your professional journey?
I would be delighted to, especially because we lost Secretary Mineta earlier this year. I've been thinking a lot about him in the weeks and months since. If I were to distill the parts of his person and his career that I find the most inspiring, it's that he, throughout his career, drew upon lived experiences in order to stand up for human dignity. He claimed his rightful earned place at the table, and he sat at many important tables. And also, he made it a priority to make space and room for others. And I think that all of these aspects of Secretary Mineta's legacy come together in a story that many people tell about him, which is that after serving as mayor and serving as a member of Congress, he was President Clinton's Secretary of Commerce, and then worked for President Bush as his Secretary of Transportation, and he was the sitting U.S. Secretary of Transportation on September 11th. And that in the immediate aftermath of 9/11 happening, drawing from his own lived experience of having been a child during the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, he said to President Bush, we must, in everything that we do from here on out, be sensitive to distinguish between the acts of those who perpetrated 9/11 and from Muslim Americans and the Muslim community. And I think that that story really embodies many of the things that I respect most about Secretary Mineta and really inspire me in terms of carrying on his legacy.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And, the Secretary Mineta was such an icon within our community, having served as the first Asian American on the cabinet. And we are very proud of having you also representing the Asian American community on the cabinet as well. You are also historically known for the fact that you are the first woman of color confirmed to serve as United States Trade Representative. Why should the next generation of leaders, and particularly AA and NHPI leaders, pursue a career in economics and trade policy?
Well, the first reason is because it can be a little lonely for me. So the more of us that there are, the more fun it will be. But, seriously, I think that once again, if I look at the career of Norm Mineta, he was the first in so many different ways. When he was in Congress, he founded CAPAC, he founded APAICS, he cleared the way for those of us who are coming after him. And in many ways, I hope that for Asian Americans, for women and women of color, you see that it's being done. And frankly, I feel deeply about this, that the more of us that there are serving in our government, serving at these levels in our government, the better we are as a country, and certainly the better we perform as a government. So, selfishly, it's to expand the community from where I sit, but also I think that truly, patriotically, in terms of public service, the more that our levels of government look like America, the better America is.
I can't agree with you more. The administration's focus is on advancing inclusive, worker-centered trade policy. How does this differ from previous approaches? And how do you envision realizing this value?
Well, it's really interesting because when you talk to people about trade, my family members, for example, they don't often track what it is that takes up all my time every day. Today, I think it's a bit different. Trade has been very front and center in the national conversation, the national economic conversation. But President Biden has asked us to implement and formulate a worker-centered trade policy. And part of the design of this, and part of why I think what he's asked for is brilliant, is no one's ever really talked about trade policies being worker-centered before. We are trying to put in place, a disruptive approach, something that is different from the past, because we would like for our trade policies to be better, to better serve the interests of all Americans, and to really focus on how trade policy should benefit not just our trade flows, not just our trade balance or our economic sectors, but really how trade policy can operate as part of our economic policy toolbox to benefit regular people, to benefit our workers, to benefit our communities. Part of what we're doing here at USTR in furtherance of this innovation is USTRs, the U.S. trade representatives, and officials who work at this agency. We spend a lot of our time traveling. Most of our travel is international. We show up in places like Geneva, where the World Trade Organization is. We show up in countries that are hosting the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation every year. We show up to have trade negotiations with other countries, and those are all outside of the borders of the United States. But it's in our name. We are the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative. So what we're doing in all of these international meetings and negotiations and enforcement proceedings is we are representing the interests of the United States. Not just one part of the United States, not just one set of stakeholders, but the entire United States economy. And so what we are doing in our time here in the Biden administration is we have tasked ourselves also to leave Washington and to travel the country, to travel out across the United States to meet American workers, the American people, where they live and where they raise their families and where they work. And the whole point of this, partially, is to let people know that we exist because we are a small but mighty agency, to let them know what we do. And then for our purposes, to connect with people and communities and stakeholders directly so that they can tell us what their interests are, so that will inform the work that we do when we are in these international forums. And I think that really is different from what USTR has done in the past. And again, it is about representing America and also ensuring that we are representing our democratic principles. We are here to further the interests of all Americans.
Well, that sounds like a much more holistic approach to trade, which I don't think most people ever think about. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Can you share more about your work as co-chair of the White House Initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, and what issue areas the initiative is focused on?
I would love to do that. So Secretary Becerra and I are co-chairs of the White House Initiative. We are also co-chairs of the President's Advisory Commission on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. These two institutions are really important. They really embody the U.S. federal government coming together, organizing ourselves, and thinking and working in an organized way to assess what parts of the resources that the federal government has can be used to leverage the creation of equality, justice, opportunity, equity for the AA-NHPI community. And just to be clear, this community, and it's apparent in its name, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, our community is really community of communities. There is a complexity and richness and diversity within AA-NHPI. There are, I think, 45 or 46 different government components in the White House Initiative that are working together on an interagency basis to push ourselves to examine how we can tap the resources of the federal government to address the needs of our community. And there are some specific focuses for our work. For example, and I think that this is one of the most important, how do we use the resources of the federal government to promote the inclusion and belonging of AA and NHPIs? And how do we do it, for example, through addressing language access and accessing government services? How do we look at all of the data collection services that we have and the data analytical services that we have and think through how can we figure out how to disaggregate that data so that we can better serve the needs of the diversity and the nuances within the AA-NHPI community? Anti-Asian hate, discrimination, bias, which can always be present and a problem, are particularly accentuated right now as we are still struggling through our recovery from the COVID pandemic. We know that there have been particular spikes, and there are a lot of AA-NHPI community members who feel less safe today living our lives in America than we have in the past. That is another area for us to focus. Health equity as well. I know recently there was a report that came out, I believe it was the CDC, talking about decreases in life expectancy here in the United States. And the report also talks about those decreases as they impact specific racial and ethnic communities within the United States. And we see that those impacts have been different for different communities. And they have been quite significant for the AA-NHPI communities. And that is another area where I think that it is really important and valuable for us to go through this process. So those are a couple of the examples. The process is a very robust one that the initiative has. It is always ongoing. There's always work that is being done. But there also are a lot of opportunities designed for members of our community to feed in your input, your feedback, your voices to be heard. And I encourage everyone to participate in the opportunities that we've created to be heard, because it really is through this back and forth that we are going to be able to make the progress that we need to.
Well, thank you for keeping that dialogue open and being a part of the community in such a way that allows for feedback and for community individuals and leaders and all in organizations to participate so that we can continuously look at our community and do better. So thank you very much for providing that opportunity. The APAICS Tech Summit, which we're so delighted to have you join us in this capacity, we're focused on tech issues that affect the AA-NHPI community and the nation at large. How does the Biden administration's trade agenda factor into this? And what are the most pressing technology issues in trade that you are focused on?
Sure. So technology is everywhere. And Madeline, our ability to have this conversation in this format is thanks to technology and digitalization that's impacted all of our lives and just made possible things that were not possible before. It's a really wonderful thing. It's also a complicated thing. And through the lens of trade and economics, one of the dynamics that we're very conscious of is we have lots of international trade rules that were fashioned really several decades ago. And they're really focused on rules that apply to trade in goods, the things that we trade across borders, and also trade in services, which, tourism is a service, and the things that we can't touch that cross borders as well. If you look at the world we live in today, the way that our economy works, the way that we conduct our lives, so much of it is online. So much of it is through a technological interface. I even have air conditioning units now that are smart and that you can control remotely and can kind of regulate themselves. So we're just living in a world that in the past felt very futuristic to us, but is actually the world of today. The fact of the matter is that our trade rules haven't really kept up. And I know that our domestic regulations are also trying to keep pace with where our economy and where our reality is today. So I think that this is one of the areas that is really cutting edge and really important for us to engage with our trading partners. And we are having intensified conversations around digital trade rules with the countries in the Indo-Pacific. Now, there are 14 that are participating. Also in the Trade and Technology Council, which is something that we do with the Europeans. And in almost every one of our relationships, in our trading relationships, digital issues and technology issues come up regularly. One of the things that we are very conscious of in the spirit of the worker-centered trade policy is as we are creating rules here, as we are engaging with our partners, how do we do it in the most holistic way possible? How do we try to take the blinders off and make sure that we are sensitive to and carrying out the interests of not just our tech companies, but also our consumers, our users, our content creators, our workers, every one of us that comes into contact with the digital economy, which frankly these days is the entire economy. How can we bring along everyone's concerns and everyone's aspirations and wishes and engage constructively with our trading partners? I think that this will be an iterative process. We will begin with one set of conversations and one set of rules, and we need to create the space to let that conversation expand. But it is really one of the most exciting things that we are doing. And I think also one of the most important areas where we are engaged to make sure that we are building the foundation for robust, constructive, and inclusive cooperation with our trading partners so that we can build a set of rules that will really promote a today and a tomorrow that works for all of us.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Tai. Unfortunately, we are out of time. We thoroughly have enjoyed having this conversation with you. Appreciate all of your leadership and work. And thank you to all of our participants for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Madeline, and thanks to everyone.